One of the most important aspects of creating a character the audience will be interested in following, especially if they're the hero, is to make them likable. That's not necessarily a requirement, which I'll get to, but if you want the viewer to root for your hero, it's definitely something to consider. The lead character can certainly have flaws which play a role in advancing the story, but if these flaws turn into complete turn-offs, that can become an issue. A good example is Woody in certain drafts of Toy Story. This was actually a difficult protagonist to write, as so much of the plot of the movie depends on his jealousy of Buzz Lightyear entering Andy's room. He's continually annoyed at this new arrival and is bothered by everyone lavishing him with attention. The most pivotal turning point of the movie is when Woody plots to have Buzz fall behind the dresser. This is Woody at his most desperate, and we're supposed to be upset that he resorts to this act of sabotage. Buzz instead flies out the window, and the toys turn against Woody. Despite all of this, we still like Woody and hope he can find Buzz and things turn out okay for him in the end. However, there was a point during production of Toy Story when Woody was written as a completely angry jerk, and it was a disaster. In the final version, he's flawed and misguided, but still has his good qualities. In this early version, Woody is a straight-up dictator to the other toys.
You don't think I was right? Who said your job was to think, Spring Wiener?
Why would we ever want this Woody to find happiness in the end? Now, you do have stories where jerks eventually grow hard, and we're happy for them. Look at The Emperor's New Groove. Kuzco is not a good person at all in the first half of the movie. He's spoiled, selfish, has a massive ego, and only cares about himself. Everyone who's infuriated with Kuzco is entirely justified. And yet somehow, through good writing, we end up rooting for him at the end to turn back into a human. Part of it comes through his interactions with the friendly Pacha. Now he ends up changing Kuzco for the good. So what's the difference between Kuzco and Dictator Woody? I think it's because Kuzco does not begin as the hero of the story. Pacha is clearly the likable protagonist we feel sympathy for. Woody, even in those early drafts, is set up as the main hero, and instead he's an a-hole with no redeeming qualities. That's why the writers then gave his attitude a major overhaul, so we still like Woody. Now, there have been a few cases of heroes I disliked, but then slowly changed my tune as they evolved. Doctor Strange comes to mind. When watching his first appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I had a difficult time taking a liking to him. After he has his accident, and before becoming a magical sorcerer, he just came off as really horrible to everyone, even his loved ones. The filmmakers attempted to give him this charming, cocky attitude, not unlike Tony Stark in Iron Man. The difference is that Tony still had this likability, and we see his genuine affection for those close to him shine through. With Stephen Strange, he just gives off this condescending and snotty attitude that he's better than everyone, and I did not sense that much of a character growth. It actually took until Avengers Infinity War for me to actually start enjoying his presence. Of course, the MCU is a never-ending cinematic universe, so they have time to flesh out and improve the characters as they go along. Most movie characters only have a few hours for us to warm up to them. I've talked about heroic characters who are flawed, but what about genuinely good-hearted characters? One who just wants to be helpful and always has good intentions. Well, I've noticed there seems to be a backlash against them. A character that comes to mind is Danny in Cats Don't Dance. I've occasionally seen him referred to as the weak link of the movie. Because he's eternally optimistic, frequently sees the good in others, and doesn't have a mean-spirited bone in his body, Danny has sometimes been called dull, or worst of all, the dreaded and always misused, bland. I feel dirty just saying the word. Well, I personally really like those characters. You oftentimes need that ray of shining light in your protagonist, especially when he's dealing with a world that's always throwing negativity their way. Yes, Danny is shown as too trusting towards Darla Dimple, or overly certain that he can change the Hollywood casting system. However, those are traits that make him who he is, and that does not make him a weak character in my opinion. But it seems big-hearted and cheery protagonists get a bum rap. Unless you're Paddington, because everyone likes Paddington. Another important part of writing a likable character comes from how they respond to foes. Look at Bugs Bunny and why he deals with the villains in his cartoons. Bugs is often justified when he goes up against Yosemite Sam or Elmer Fudd, because they usually cause the problems first. He just wants to eat his carrots and live peacefully in his rabbit hole, but then they come barging in, and you realize, of course, this means war. Same goes for the Warner siblings in Animaniacs. When they decide to mess with someone they meet, it's because they are jerks to them. There's also a difference between how they treat their psychiatrist, Dr. Scratch and Sniff, and how they treat that newscaster in that one episode. In a similar vein are the Marx Brothers. In their comedies, the brothers and their writing team always made sure they targeted snobs with their wild antics and Groucho's one-liners. But the ordinary couple trying to save the sanitarium, the brothers are friendly and supportive towards them. And when Groucho, Chico, and Harpo are going up against each other, it's always playful, like the classic mirror scene in Duck Soup. In the Tom and Jerry cartoons, Jerry usually tries to harm Tom, because that cat keeps trying to eat him or put mousetraps outside his little door. And that was actually one of my issues with the recent Tom and Jerry movie that came out this year. The first time they meet in the movie, Tom is not bothering Jerry and is just playing his keyboard in Central Park. And then Jerry decides to be a jerk to Tom completely unprovoked. There are a number of times when Jerry chooses to provoke others out of his own twisted enjoyment. And unlike with the classic cartoons, I wondered why I was supposed to root for this mouse. It's also a problem I tend to have with some Adam Sandler comedies. We're meant to be charmed by his character's quirks, but he often plays protagonists who are irresponsible, obnoxious, and prone to anger issues. I actually think that's partly why Punch Drunk Love and Uncut Gems work, and why I don't find 8 Crazy Nights as bad as others. Those movies have a self-awareness about his character's flaws, and show how self-destructive they are, as opposed to something like Happy Gilmore or Big Daddy, where we're supposed to think, oh, that rapscallion and his wacky shenanigans, what a goofball. Now, just because the lead protagonist is unlikable, that does not always mean we're not interested in following them or they cannot be compelling leads. A good amount of Martin Scorsese's filmography centers on terrible people we're not supposed to root for. However, they are still fascinating individuals, and Scorsese uses his movies to dig into precisely what makes them who they are. Examples include Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, Henry Hill in Goodfellas, Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull, and Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street. While other movies might be about a rags-to-riches story, or the hero saving the day, Scorsese appears interested in making films about the rise and fall of a person. In Raging Bull, Jake is not a good person. He's a wife-beater who takes his boxing matches from the ring and takes them home. We're not supposed to like him, and Scorsese shows how his violent personality ultimately becomes his downfall. Same with Henry Hill in Goodfellas. He's portrayed as a violent psychopath who loves his gangster lifestyle until it all comes crashing down. We're not supposed to finish watching Goodfellas and think, oh, it's a shame that happened to him. We're supposed to think, good, that's what he deserves. This obviously goes back to the classic gangster movies like Scarface and The Public Enemy, which also showed these violent criminals getting their just desserts at the end. James Cagney spent a good amount of his career playing despicable characters, and he did a great job of making the audience hate them while still being fascinated by them. Film censors at the time were actually worried viewers would start looking up to these gangsters, which is why the Motion Picture Production Code required that anyone who participated in criminal activity be punished by the movie's end. In the end, it's execution that matters, and whether the film is able to do a good job of showing the characters' positive qualities or their flaws. If they're the hero, make sure we want them to succeed, and if we're meant to root against them, also portray them accordingly. See you next time.